We're going to be talking about navigating rough waters, and of course, every business has tough times. So, and speaking of death, let's talk about it. That's one of the rough waters that we are always dealing with our clients. And disability sort of goes hand in hand with death and disability, permanent disability, not short-term disability, but permanent disability. And these examples on the screen, the rainmaker, the key employee, sort of go together. If you've got a rainmaker, somebody who brings in all the business, and there aren't any other folks in the business who generate business for the business, that has a significant impact on the valuation of the business. It has a significant impact on the others who are involved in the business. So if the rainmaker dies, the others may not be able to stay in that business, and the business may not be able to survive. And the value of the business may be severely diminished if the rainmaker leaves. Similarly, if you've got a key employee, somebody who's there who generates calm among the rough waters that exist in the business all the time. I'll give you an example. I have a client who, he brings in a lot of business, but he's got a lot of salespeople who are out there on the street generating revenue for the company constantly. And they're very flamboyant, and they're very extroverted. Then he's got the operations people who help put on the events that this company does. I can't really say too much more about it without revealing the identity of it. And the internal people are just as important in many ways as the external people, because without those internal people, the events don't get pulled off successfully. But they're always at each other's throats. The extroverts and the introverts, the operations people and the sales people, always at each other's throats. So what do? You have an owner who's incredibly good at communicating with both sides and keeps the calm. What happens if that owner dies? What happens to the business? I'll bet you've seen this, Margaret, in your valuation practice, and I'll bet many of you have seen this in your practices in advising clients. So I grouped those two together, and then the other two I grouped together. Self-sustaining business. The founder is able to step away from the business. The owner is able to step away from the business because he or she has good people behind him or her running the business on a day-to-day basis, and it's able to generate the kind of profits that need to be generated so that the owner is satisfied. Or you have a professionally managed business. We have many clients that have grown to the point where the founder is older and the kids can no longer run the business. It's just beyond their abilities. Or they don't want to be in the business. They want to be out in Colorado learning psychology and being with nature or other things. And so what do you do in that situation? You have a professionally managed business. So let's do some case study and look at some situations. What happens when the founder dies or becomes severely disabled or permanently disabled? Let's look at this first case study. This is a true story. Many of these, in fact, all of these case studies that are in this presentation today are based on my actual experience with clients. And I won't reveal the actual names of the clients, but I can tell you that these are true stories. And some of them I've changed the facts a little bit to suit the situation. And some of them haven't happened yet, but I'm worried that they might. And we're trying to do the planning now for the clients to avoid disastrous results. So case study number one, I have an individual who owned 51% of the stock of a service-disabled veteran-owned government contractor, which qualifies for small business set-asides from the federal government. He died suddenly at the age of 59. I mean, suddenly. No one expected it. It was a complete shock. He has 3 young sons, aging in range of ages from 20 to 26. And he has a widow. And the widow was dependent on his ability to generate income from this business to support their lifestyle, which was not lavish, but it was comfortable. He also had a right-hand person who was his CFO. And the CFO pretty much did everything for this guy from the very beginning. He didn't have a formal board of directors. He didn't have a governance structure, but he had minority shareholders who he sold stock to early on, and they did have a form of a shareholders agreement. But in the shareholders agreement, it said that the company must buy out the shares of the founder on his death, which was not the right answer here. Because on his death, there was great disruption. And as a service-disabled veteran-owned business, the rule is that if the 51% owner dies, you lose the ability to bid on new service-disabled veteran contracts. You don't lose all your contracts, though. And here's the rub. In fact, you don't lose your contracts. You get to continue fulfilling any contracts that you've received by receiving task orders under those existing contracts. And any bids and proposals that were submitted prior to the death of the founder are also respected by the federal government under federal government contracts law. So the CFO stepped in, and she was going to run the company because she was his right-hand person, and she had kind of this bravado about her. So we quickly put together a board of directors. The board of directors consisted of the widow and the minority shareholders. And fortunately, in this situation, we had 3 minority shareholders who all had significant experience in the world of government contracting. In fact, one of them was the founder of one of the biggest government contractors in the DC area, if not across the country. So having those people on our board of directors was invaluable. That was step 1. Step 2, we realized that the CFO was engaging in sort of unilateral activities that we had to sort of manage a little bit better. And when we found out what she had done, she had taken a bonus literally 2 weeks after the founder died, paid herself an $85,000 bonus. There was no documentation evidencing the permission of the founder. Paid out the bonus to herself, and that began the beginning of her end. We terminated her, and then we brought in professional management. One of the minority shareholders had 2 folks who were available to come in and help run the company. One served as the president. He really had never been a president before, but he had been a program manager in government contracts and knew these clients that they had. And the other was a CFO, sort of an interim CFO. The 2 of them were able to double the size of the company in less than 2 years. And we sold the company 3 weeks ago for twice of what the shareholders wanted originally in the sale of the company. So it all worked out really well. Question?
So when they doubled the company, they did it outside of the service disabled?
No, it was all under the service disabled, veteran-owned business realm. They started to diversify into what we call full and open contracts, but most of the contracts at the time of the sale were service disabled, veteran-owned. What did the buyer get? The buyer got relationships with some very important agencies that they didn't have relationships with. And the agencies probably, even though they have to recertify these contracts as non-service disabled veteran, were willing to do so because of the relationships that had been built between the company and the agencies. Question?
And did they continue with the buyout of the widow for as of date of death?
So what happened was, immediately, I was involved at the very beginning. We redid the shareholders agreement. And the shareholders agreement was modified to not require the buyout of the widow, which was to her benefit. For 2 years, she stayed on as the CEO of the company, received compensation for serving as the CEO, and at the end, received a nice payout on the sale of her shares. And we actually did some estate planning in between to allow for some of her shares to be transferred in trust to the 3 sons. And so all of them ended up with a benefit out of the sale of the transaction. And the minority shareholders were ecstatic. They didn't expect to get anything close to what they're getting in the sale. And there's an additional earnout. We sold it for $21 million. There's an earnout on top of it that will generate potentially $7 or $8 million. And it's not that difficult to achieve under the terms of the earnout. We helped structure it. Our firm represented the seller in connection with the sale of the company on the M&A transaction. We had an investment banker involved. We interviewed investment bankers. I was sort of the engineer behind this, making sure all this was being done according to a process that you would normally follow. So that was a good ending to the story. But not all stories end well.